This month's podcasts are sponsored by Aubergine Legal. Do you sometimes worry that your business isn't meeting all its legal compliance requirements and wonder if you're ticking all the legal boxes? Are you losing sleep worrying about a piece of legislation that you may or may not be complying with? Perhaps you need some help with your client contracts or your data protection compliance. Or maybe you're worried that your website doesn't have the right documents or legal notices in the right place. Perhaps you have a brand that you want to protect with a trademark. How about if you could outsource it all and eliminate all of your worries? If so, then get in touch with Aubergine Legal, a friendly commercial legal consultancy offering practical and clear commercial legal advice without the overwhelming legal jargon, taking the worry away and helping you to protect your business and minimise your risks. Aubergine offers a free 30-minute consultation if you have any questions or want to find out if they can help, and you can access this link and book your free 30-minute call via the link in the show notes. Welcome to the Bring Your Product Idea to Life podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're getting started selling products or if you'd like to create your own product to sell. I'm Vicky Weinberg, a product creation coach and Amazon expert. Every week I share friendly, practical advice as well as inspirational stories from small businesses. Let's get started. Today on the podcast, I'm speaking to Lucy Self. Lucy is the founder of Save My Knickers, a bloodstain remover which is here to empower you to feel amazing in your favourite knickers every day of the month, reduce waste and break period taboos. I had a really great conversation with Lucy. Her product, as you might have established, is really unique. It's certainly the only bloodstain remover that I've come across, and so we speak a lot about the challenges of selling such a unique product, also some of the taboos that Lucy has come up against when trying to sell a period-related product. We speak about what inspired her to start her business and how she formulated the product herself and then began her business while working full-time. I found this really interesting as Lucy spoke about some of the steps she took right at the beginning of her business that typically maybe some people think of a bit further down the line to ensure that she could start her business as a business while still working at that time too. She'll share how she made the transition into working in her business full-time a few years later. And yet overall we just had such a fascinating conversation and I think you'll find it really interesting. So I would love now to introduce you to Lucy. So hi Lucy, thank you so much for being here.
Hiya, how are you?
Really good, thank you. Very excited to talk to you. So can we please start with you giving an introduction to yourself, your business and what you sell?
Yes, so my name is Lucy and I am the founder of Save My Knickers. And Save My Knickers is a stain removing powder that gets blood out of underwear, clothing, bedding, pajamas. So trying to make periods a little bit better and trying to reduce the number of knickers and things that we throw in the bin as a result of blood stains.
That's amazing, Lucy. And I think I mentioned I actually came across you when I was looking for basically what your product does. So can you just explain a little bit more for people what your product is and how it works? I don't know if yours is the only product like it on the market, but you're certainly the only one that I've come across.
Yeah, so we are the only stain removing powder specifically for blood stains. So the way that it works is, so say you get a stain in your knickers, for example, is before you put them in the wash, you put the powder on the stain, you add some cold water and leave it to soak overnight. And then you just put it in the wash with all your other clothes as normal, and then the stain is gone. So it's super easy to use, super quick to use. It's not complicated. And it just means that then those blood stains come out when you wash them. Because I don't know about you, but I found with other kind of generic stain removers that you just add to the wash, they don't really do anything. They don't really make a difference. And sort of old wives' tales that people say, put your knickers in the sunshine or add a bit of lemon juice. I found they didn't really work either, which is sort of why I came up with the product as well. So that's how we work. I say we work on knickers and pajamas and clothing and bedding and towels. We've had some customers use it on their carpet. So kind of anything that you happen to get blood on.
I think that's amazing because as you say, other products, they might fade it slightly, but then it almost looks a bit worse actually. This is the only thing that I've tried that actually does the job. Yeah. And what inspired you, Lucy, to come up with Save My Knickers?
So I was just really bored of ruining my own underwear. So I have polycystic ovary syndrome, so PCOS. And with that, I have really irregular periods. So I never know whether my period's going to start or when it finishes, whether it is actually finished. Sometimes they can be really heavy and sometimes they can be really light. And I was just really fed up of getting bloodstains on my underwear and pajamas and bed sheets as well, and then not being able to get rid of them with other conventional methods. So I decided to experiment in the kitchen and found something that worked. And then it was only sort of after I was sharing that with some friends and things that they were like, you're not the only person in the world to ever have a period or have a baby or have gynae surgery, for example. That's a problem that I think that so many other people have had. Just nobody really talks about it. It's not something that you necessarily say, hey, guess what? I got some blood on my knickers today. So it was, I realized it started off just for me. And then I soon realized that it was a problem actually that lots of people had. And so I needed to share that with everybody.
So before you started it as a business, I'd love to go back a step if that's okay, Lucy.
Yeah,
and ask you, because I'm really fascinated by this. How on earth did you know how to make something that would take the stains out? Because you've overlooked that, but that's massive that you actually did this. Because am I right in thinking you did this yourself? It's not like you went to a company and gave them a brief of what you wanted to do. You actually formulated it yourself.
Yeah. So, and I get this question a lot. So people say, "Oh, you must be really good at chemistry." I'm really not. So my background is physiotherapy. So I was working as a children's physio in the NHS. So not working in the cleaning world or the period world or anything like that. And I actually got a D at A-level in chemistry. I don't tend to share that with many people. And I often think that if I was to tell my chemistry teacher what I'm doing now, she'd probably be like, what? Really? I don't think you would ever be able to do anything like that. So yeah, chemistry is not my thing. But I just experimented. So I quite like baking and I quite like cooking. So I sort of thought of it as a bit like that. So trying to different ingredients, different quantities of ingredients and different timeframes for leaving it to soak and different fabrics. And I think one of the other funny things when I look back at when we were doing our product formulation is whenever anybody bled in the house, obviously with periods, you don't have a constant supply of blood. So product testing is actually quite hard. But obviously all blood is the same. So if my husband had a nosebleed or if my daughter had a nosebleed or if someone cut themselves, I'd be like, quick, find some knickers. Which knickers haven't we tested yet? And then it's only when I look back that I was like, we could have tested it on any random fabrics, but it always had to be a pair. So I'd go through my knicker drawer and be like, oh, we haven't tested this pair or we haven't tested that fabric. So that was quite funny when I look back and think about all these. I used to have all these mugs lined up on the kitchen surface with all various different colours of knickers and fabrics of knickers, testing them all out. So yeah, that was how we started.
That's amazing. When I just feel, I'm fascinated by the fact that you came up with it yourself. But I guess it's at first, were you literally just thinking this is going to be something you were going to use yourself when you were in the formulation stage?
Yeah, to start with, just because maybe I didn't realize that it was such a problem for everybody else. Or maybe I just thought, maybe generic stain removers work for other people or but the people aren't bothered about it. But yeah, so to start with, it was purely just for myself. And then, as I say, the more, I think because I was so excited that I'd found something that worked, and so started talking about it with more people. And then the more I talked about it, the more I realized that actually I could impact a lot of other people and help a lot of other people. And also just reduce a lot of waste. I think we throw away so many things, so many items because of blood stains, or they get replaced. So, if you've got, especially bed sheets and big items like that, you get blood on them and then you don't necessarily want to use them. You don't want to use them if you have people coming to stay. They're not, especially white bed sheets and that sort of thing. And then you just buy more of them. And I think as a society, we're trying to reduce the amount that we're doing that. And so there was sort of this twofold, we're going to be able to reduce waste. And there is also something amazing about wearing your favorite knickers, right? So when you get up in the morning and you put on your best knickers, you're like, yes, I feel incredible. I can take on the world. But if you put on your sad, stained, granny pants, that you just make you feel a little bit sad. And so the fact that I could wear whatever knickers I wanted to, or whatever pajamas I wanted to, and sleep in whatever bed sheets I wanted to. And then I was like, oh my goodness, everybody else should be able to have this. So that was sort of the moment that I was like, I need to share this.
Absolutely. I mean, you're right, because it's amazing that you can do that, because you're right. I think a lot of us have our special underwear that we save when we're on our period, and like you say, in pajamas, there's definitely things where you go, oh, I won't risk. Well, for me, there was definitely things where I'd go, oh, I'm not going to risk wearing that just in case, because the last thing you want to do is ruin something. So I think you're right that I'm sure that it must be something that a lot of us experience. And as you say, not just women on periods, but childbirth and all kinds of, I guess, other, how do I say it, non-gynecological things as well, like any kind of surgery, recovery, or anything like that. So it's great that you decided to sort of make it into a business and make it available to other people. You did mention that very briefly, but I did pick up on this, that you were working as a physiotherapist at the time. So how were you able to start and grow your business alongside what I guess must have been a really busy career at the time?
Yeah, so I came up with the idea sort of mid 2019, and then was sort of doing little bits on the side. And I also have a 5-year-old, so was also then juggling, like at the time she was probably 2, so being on to a 2-year-old and working. So I worked 4 days a week for the NHS, and then just as things were starting to get a lot of traction business wise, then COVID hit, and then obviously for the NHS that was just crackers. And so when I look back, I'm not really sure how I did it, but it was basically any time that I wasn't working in the NHS or being mum was dedicated to Save My Knickers, basically. So evenings, weekends, and I did a lot of driving in my role in the NHS. So like listening to audiobooks and things to sort of help, learning about things like marketing and business development and all of that, because obviously they don't teach any of that at physio school. So yeah, doing that. And then eventually I reduced the hours that I was working for the NHS so that I could then commit more hours to Save My Knickers. And then it got to the point where I knew there was going to be a time where I'd have to take that leap of faith and leave the NHS and take on full-time knicker saving. And so I did that February last year, which has been amazing.
That is amazing. And that's quite a short period of time, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, especially that. Yeah, and I can't believe like how far I've come and how much I've learned as well. I think I see a lot of my colleagues that I used to work with, and they just say like, well, how did you learn all of this? And like, where did you find out how to do all of this? And I think it's quite scary when you first start out and you don't really know anything. But there's so much support out there, especially like our local council have been amazing. And there's all these sort of like pockets of people that are really happy to share their business experience and share their business skills. And you can just learn from each other. And I think, maybe a few years ago, you would have, been in your like, I'm a physio and I'm only ever going to be a physio. But actually now I think that's not the case anymore. And you can learn something new at whatever age, and you can learn a new skill, even if you don't have qualifications in it. You don't have to have a business degree to run a business. And I think that's been like a huge sort of realization, I suppose, that just because you don't have that background doesn't mean you can't do it.
I think you're right. And it's definitely, I've seen a change so much over the past couple of years. I mean, this podcast has been going, I think, a similar amount of time. I started it in March 2020. And I want to say, I don't know what the percentage is, but there's a lot of people who I have on the podcast. And when I talk to them, when they started their business, they were doing something completely different, like so far away from the product they're selling, or maybe they were they were in employment, they weren't running their own business. And I definitely see over the last couple of years, and I don't know if this is a COVID, if it's related to COVID at all, possibly there's a bit of an impact where more and more people are saying, do you know what, I'm going to try and do something for myself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, more people are trying to work more flexibly and do things that work around them. And also like, learning new skills as well. I think, people go to university and or college or whatever and do whatever they're going to do, and then they stop learning. And then I think there's always that opportunity to learn more and to get new skills and to be able to do new things. So I think that's really important. I think a lot of people kind of forget that you can still do that.
Yeah. And it also sounds like you were really passionate about your product as well. So I guess that must have helped with kind of, I think if you've got the drive to get something out into the world and to tell people about it, that helps massively, because obviously you must have been really motivated to do that, and therefore motivated to learn all those skills and do what was needed. Yeah,
definitely. And I think it's been amazing as well seeing people's responses when I talk about the products. Obviously, it is a kind of period-related product, if you like. So talking a lot about periods and women's health, and especially when I first started out, talking to suppliers for things and business support and that sort of thing, and trying to explain to people what I wanted to do. And people would be like, either people would get it and be like, yes, this is genius, I totally get it. Or particularly a lot of men that I would speak to would be like, what? You want to do what? And I can't believe you've said the word period and tampon in the same sentence. But I think it's been so amazing to see how a lot of those conversations, even in the last couple of years, have changed so much. And I think that's really motivating as well, to keep pushing for that change and for people to keep talking about periods and talking about women's health and having those open conversations. I think that also really motivates me. The more that I do that, the more I'm inspired to continue to do it.
I think that's great. And as you said earlier, before I came across your product, I hadn't even thought about the fact that this was something that affected more than just me, like having to throw away a pair of knickers or whatever. So I feel like that's amazing too, that I guess more people are just, you're encouraging more people to talk about the fact that this is something that happens. Whereas I think a lot of us just don't tend to talk about our periods or anything.
Yeah, definitely. And I've had quite a few mums of teenage girls particularly say that they sort of use Save My Knickers as a talking point, as a way to start talking about periods. So rather than necessarily coming in something like, sometimes a tampon might be quite a scary thing to be like, because you've never seen a tampon, that could be quite a intimidating product potentially to start a conversation about periods. So they said they've been using it as a way to say, look, this is going to happen and you are going to get blood on stuff, especially when you first start your period and it's really irregular and you're not really sure what you're doing. And I think they've been saying that it's a really nice way to say it's okay that this is going to happen, and let's talk about this, and using it as a conversation starter. And I think that's really important as well, to have those conversations with our children, that it is something that's normal, and you don't have to be embarrassed about it. So that's been really lovely feedback to hear, that people have been using it for that.
That's really nice. And it also, I think it makes a lot of sense, because the fact that there is a product out there for it helps to normalize it, because it kind of says, okay, there are enough people that this is an issue for, so therefore there's a product for it. Whereas I think, as I said, when there wasn't any sort of solution, I think you can see why people would think, oh, it must be just me this happens to, because if it was a big issue, there would surely be a product. So I think it's amazing as well that you decided to sort of be the one to create a product to normalize it.
Yeah. And I think I just can't believe that, it's taken this long for us to find something. I think it's just something that we put up with for so long, that you just get blood on stuff and then that's ruined. And then that sucks. Like, it's just another reason that periods can suck. And you think, well, yes, they can be a bit rubbish, but here's a way to make them a little bit less rubbish. Yeah. And especially when you can wear those lovely comfy pajamas, and if you get blood on them, it's okay. It doesn't matter, because you can save them.
Let's talk about some of the other things you're doing to break period taboos as well, if that's okay. So, for example, some of your images. So for people who haven't seen your website, I'm hoping everyone will look at your website after they've listened to this conversation. But if anyone hasn't seen your website, can you talk a little bit about some of the images you use and why you've chosen to use them?
Yeah. So when I first started out and was getting imagery together, I was really keen not to use the blue liquid that is used in a lot of period imagery and period adverts in the mainstream media, because we don't bleed blue blood. I think that's really unrelatable. And to start with, I was thinking, maybe we could use sequins or something that red that you could still use to represent blood. And I was like, actually, do you know what? It's just blood. Like, if we're going to stop being embarrassed about it, then we need to use something that fully represents what the product does. And so in our imagery, we do use blood. So we have images of knickers with blood on and bed sheets with blood on, images of people wearing knickers with blood on, and just trying to show that it's okay and it is normal, and this is what a period is like. And I think that's really important, because we don't bleed blue blood and we don't bleed sequins. It's had a lot of interesting responses. I think most people initially are a bit like, oh, okay, that's quite shocking. I suppose they're not expecting it. I think more is the issue, because they're so used to seeing adverts of period products with blue blood, or no blood used in an advert, or any imagery. So I think to start with, people can be a bit shocked by it. But I think actually afterwards, they're like, well, actually, yeah, it's normal and that's okay. A very small percentage of people are not happy with the imagery that I use. But I think then that comes back to just, they're not happy to have that conversation yet, and that's okay. And, we're going to keep talking about it. We're going to keep using those images. And I think they're really powerful. And I think it just shows, I think it's reassuring for other people that that's okay. Like, I'm not the only person that has this problem.
I think so too. And just out of interest, how have you had any pushback? It's not just from customers, but sort of anywhere else using those images? I don't know, like Facebook or advertising, or have you run into any issues? Because you are doing something completely different. And when you do try and change things, I can imagine you do get a bit of pushback.
We've had quite a lot of issues, particularly on social media. So I've had my ad account is actually blocked. So I can't actually run any ads at the moment because I've been banned. I think that is, they've said that I violated their policies, and imagery was within that. So that is one of them. We've been blocked on that. I've had posts removed because of the imagery that we've been using. And then we were shortlisted in an award a couple of years ago, and we had to send imagery for the presentation. It was a huge awards. It's the National Recycling Awards, and it was in London in a big hotel. And I had to send imagery, and I sent one of our the product, and then I sent one of our images of a woman with blood on their underwear. And I was really excited because I was really hoping that they were going to display this image to all of these hundreds and thousands of people at this award, and they didn't. And I was so disappointed. They used the one that was just the product image. And I mean, it might have just been their choice to use that one rather than the other one. But I was kind of hoping that they would have used that as a kind of like making a bit of a statement, and they didn't. So I was disappointed about that. But then again, I think it's just people aren't used to seeing it, and not necessarily something people want to talk about. So
yeah, that makes sense. But it is a shame. And I can't believe, by the way, about your ad account. That just seems crazy. When you think of some of the things you see on social media, I'd actually think that a little bit of blood is fairly tame, actually.
I know. And it's not, I don't know. It's just one of those really frustrating things. And particularly because you can't go and talk to a person about it. It's just like, computer says no. Like, that's it.
Oh, but out of interest, that's a shame. But I guess, that's sort of, yeah. Have you, out of interest, have you run into any other obstacles you didn't foresee with selling something so unique?
Just trying to think. Sorry, bear with me a minute.
No, don't worry at all. Because I mean, I didn't plan this question. It's just something that suddenly occurred to me, because your product is unusual in the sense that you're the only person and the first person selling it. So I guess that does bring up a few challenges, because people they don't necessarily know that there is a product that does your product. Yeah.
So when you said that, so we have come into some issues when it comes to getting people to give the product a go, I think. So as you say, unless you have experienced that problem and then know that it's a problem and then know that there's a solution, people aren't necessarily looking for us. And then particularly when we're approaching like wholesale shops, for example, I think people aren't necessarily wanting to take a risk on a new product. So that has been a bit of a challenge. And we've been really fortunate. There's one shop that we are stocked in, and the lady that owns the shop used the product herself and then loved it. So she was a huge advocate for us. But it's quite difficult when you're approaching somebody that doesn't necessarily know that it's a solution to a problem that they don't know they had, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And I'm imagining, and I definitely don't want to generalize here, but I can imagine that this might be an easier product, therefore, to sell to women than men. When I say sell, I mean when you're from a wholesale perspective, because I suppose at least if you're approaching a woman, then there's a chance that they will have experienced the issue. Whereas I know, because I don't want to generalize at all, but I'm wondering if it's harder for men to realize that this is an issue that women have.
Yeah, definitely. And even just from my own experience, talking to my husband about it. So we have a very, open relationship. He knows everything, basically, that we don't hide anything from each other. But when I first told him what I wanted to do, he was like, "You want to do what? Like, why do you want to do that?" And then I realized that he had no idea that it was such a big problem, because, if you were to get blood on your knickers, you don't actually go, "Oh, look what I've done." Like, you just squirrel them away, right? And I predominantly do all the washing in our house. And so it wasn't ever necessarily something that he was going to come across, even though I share everything with him. So even, I just assumed that he knew that was a problem. And then I realized that he didn't. And so actually just even having that conversation with him, he was saying like, oh yeah, like I can see why this would be a problem. And I can see, why you're having to keep buying new pairs of knickers and pajamas and things. And so that's been fascinating, actually. And then also seeing his journey that he's come on. So to start with, he would be all awkward about it and wouldn't want to say the word period and, tampon and vulva and all sorts of things. And now, when he has conversations with his colleagues about what I do, he's in a very male dominated industry. And he sometimes just drops the period bomb in a conversation with his colleagues and sort of just to see them all react really awkwardly. So yeah, it's really interesting seeing different male responses. I suppose it's, whether it's spoken about, how much they know about it, because as women, maybe we don't share that with them as well. So I think we can do something as well to help with that, and talking to our other halves and, children. And even my granddad has now got involved. And so last year when it was the tennis and there was all of the discussion about whether the women should be allowed to wear black knickers or white shorts and black shorts and things. And so my granddad lives in Wimbledon, so he's a huge fan of the tennis, and I was a ball girl, so tennis is in our family. And he rang me up to tell me that he'd saved me an article in the newspaper about periods and the tennis, and how he believes that they should be able to wear whatever colour knickers they want. And I was like, for a 90-something-year-old man, I thought that was quite impressive.
It's really impressive. And I think you're right. It's just good to normalize things. I feel like that it's about so many things that the more we talk about them, the more they're just normal, and then we don't have to be embarrassed. So I think that's brilliant. Would you mind if I just to change tack very quickly, would you mind if there's one more thing I was just interested in
Sure.
asking about, if you don't mind? I think I'm asking because I think people listening might find this really interesting. So obviously you came up with the formula yourself, and then when you switched to growing the business, I'm just wondering, is this something that you are able to still make yourself, or does that change when it's a business? I genuinely don't know any of this, so I'm just curious, because I feel like if anyone's listening and they've got an idea for something, that this just might be quite helpful.
Yeah, so from the very start of the business, we knew that we didn't want to be mixing any formulas and holding any stock at our house, just from a space perspective. We don't have a lot of extra room here, and we wanted to try and make the product side of the business as hands off as possible. So once we'd come up with the formula, we then approached manufacturing companies and for the packaging, and then from the filling perspective and everything else. So that was all automated from the beginning. And the same with our fulfillment side of things. So when somebody places an order on our website, or if I input a wholesale order, for example, that's all automated and goes through to our fulfillment center, and then they send the products out. So we don't actually do any of the filling or hold any stock at home. So it probably from a cost and efficiency perspective from the beginning, that was quite a big jump. So I think maybe we could have kept it at home to start with, but we were very conscious that we didn't have a lot of space. And equally, the minimum order quantities for things were quite high. So our initial run, we needed to buy 2,000 tubes, which we were like, we don't really know what 2,000 tubes looks like. Like, that sounds like a lot of tubes. And so I just had images of our house being filled with all these turquoise tubes. And so we knew from the get-go that we didn't want to have that. And we wanted that to be, I didn't want to have to keep running to the post office every day. And so thought we would automate that side of the business as quickly as possible, which has really helped from the perspective of being able to do everything else in the business, because it is just still me. So that's really helpful.
That really makes sense. And I guess also when you started the business, you were still working 4 days a week. So I think this would have been a lot had you been doing it yourself. So, and thank you for explaining that, because I was really curious at what point that happened, because I know for myself, when I had my own products business, I did automate everything, but not from the start. And looking back, that is something I wish I had thought about doing sooner, because as you say, you can spend so much time doing the practical things that you don't need to be doing, like filling boxes and going to the post office. That can
Yeah.
take up an awful amount of time, and it's not arguably possibly not always the best use of time.
Yeah. And just like prime example of this, like just yesterday. So we were trying to get onto Amazon because we aren't, at the moment, we're not listed on there. So I'm in the process of trying to get that off the ground. But just because of the way that Amazon works with their labeling and stuff, I'm doing that from home initially. And so yesterday I wasted so much time trying to work out how my printer prints labels. I had hours like just trying to work, which way does the paper go in the printer, and then having to cut them out and stick them on and all of that stuff that just really made me reflect on how glad I am that we did automate the other side of things as much as possible. And hopefully as after I've done my experiment with Amazon and that hopefully that will all work, then I can get our fulfillment center to do that side of things as well. But it just reminded me of how long, as you say, labeling things takes. Like it just takes forever.
It does, and especially when you're sort of used to being more hands off with like the practical side of it.
Yeah.
I found that it always gives you a bit of a shock, doesn't it, when you're sort of out of the habit of doing it and then suddenly you have to do it again.
Yeah. I just thought, I'll just quickly label up these boxes. And then, as you say, like an hour or so later, I was like, how has this taken me that long to stick like 8 labels on a box?
Well, hopefully you won't have to do that again for a while.
Yeah, hopefully.
So one final question, please, Lucy, if that's okay, which I asked everyone, is
Yeah.
What would your number one piece of advice be for other product creators?
My number one piece of advice would be that you can always do it. I think a lot of people have a lot of self-doubt, and I think it's really easy to go down that doubt spiral and think, oh, I can't do it and I'm not good enough and I don't know how. I think you can do anything, and just believing that you can do anything and keeping that in your mind, especially on the days where things don't work and things feel really difficult, is just remembering that you can do it.
Oh, I like that. Thank you.
Thanks.
And of course, we'll link to your website and social media and everything else in the show notes.
Yeah. Oh, amazing.
Thank you so much for listening right to the end of this episode. Do remember that you can get the full back catalogue and lots of free resources on my website, vickyweinberg.com. Please do remember to rate and review this episode if you've enjoyed it, and also share it with a friend who you think might find it useful. Thank you again, and see you next week. If you've been inspired to start a podcast in 2024, I really recommend my podcast host, Captivate. Captivate were my top pick when I started podcasting 4 years ago because of how easy it was for a complete novice like me to get started. I've stuck with them for the last 4 years because Captivate is still really simple to use. They keep adding great new features like the ability to share ads like these, and they've just been really reliable. So when you're ready to start your own podcast, you can use the link in the show notes and get a free 7-day trial with Captivate.